I have only 5 words for you.
From my cold, dead hands.
Welcome back to episode 11 of the Backwards History Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Will, here with my co-host, Kevin. Say hi, Kevin.
Hi, Kevin.
Shut up, Kevin.
Oh, yeah.
Today we've got a special guest with us, and we're probably going to have him here for the next 2 episodes of the Backwards History Podcast. His name is Nick, and he owns a private security firm. Go ahead and give yourself a little bit of an introduction, Nick.
I'm Nick Moore with GFS Security. Honored to be here today and hope to be of relevance to these guys today.
He's a bit of a subject matter expert for our next 3 topics we're intending to discuss, but it's a bit of a hot button time given the current geopolitical setting we find ourselves in today. Kevin, start us off.
That's true. Every political season, one hot button topic issue you're guaranteed to hear about. Gun violence, gun rights, Second Amendment rights, whatever they want to call it. They're talking about firearms. And I'm always amazed at how short people's memories are when it comes to politics, because it's the same garbage every 4 years.
Isn't it interesting that every time we find ourselves in the political season close to an election, mass shootings start to pop up all over the place? Y'all know me, I'm the resident constitutionalist, but also the resident conspiracy theorist. And it is a little ironic, at the exact same time the Democratic Party started to implode themselves on the national stage in their own debates, that their one saving grace of gun control happens to rear its ugly heads, and quicker than it's ever done. But today's episode, we're going to focus on the Second Amendment and what it means to us. And it seems like me and the special guest might have a differing opinion, but we welcome it. Nick, go ahead and give us a little bit of a insight to your opinion as far as gun rights and where it should stop and start, I guess, for lack of a better way to put it.
Well, on my Second Amendment rights, of course, I believe that everybody has their rights. But with that being said, I do believe, just like when we have to go through a hunter's education course, I believe that everyone should have to go through a course letting them know about firearms, safeties and instructions and everything else like that. Because essentially what we're doing is putting a firearm in somebody's hand that says, okay, well, I'm old enough to buy a firearm, I want to fire. But how do we know that these people are actually getting the things that they need to know how to operate those firearms correctly and safely? Not only that, I mean, how many times have we come across someone that has had an accident with a firearm when that may have been prevented with a firearms course? Just like when we go through hunter's education, it teaches you, oh, well, this is how you need to operate when you're out in the woods so that everyone is safe, not just you.
So what you're saying is, if we're going to go to the extent of requiring someone to have basic knowledge of how to safely operate a firearm in the woods, when it's most likely, barring a few fringe incidences, it'll be just them and the wildlife to contend with their ability to operate a firearm more effectively, when in everyday life we give people firearms. Well, we don't give them to them, but people have firearms and we don't ever vet their ability to handle said firearm safely, which I could definitely understand. Granted, my issue is with who gets to determine what is safely and what's not. I'm fine with that. In a perfect world, civilians could definitely determine that, but in today's society, we're too busy watching cat videos on YouTube to, really think about this. Is there any kind of historical precedent for this, Kevin?
Oh, yes. Quite a few, actually. But one I think most people would find most prevalent, or at least in recent memory, comes from probably the most despised man in history, Adolf Hitler. He's quoted as saying, "The most foolish mistake we could possibly make would be to allow the subject races to possess arms. History shows that all conquerors who have allowed their subject races to carry arms have prepared their own downfall by doing so."
And you just hit the constitutionalist hot button for me.
I thought I would.
Subject races. I don't think I'm alone in feeling like the United States government's view of the American people is of us as a subject race.
No, I don't think you're alone at all.
And I think we were talking a bit off mic prior to this about Nick. You feel that there should be not just little expanding on your talking about a hunter safety course, but a broader version of that for everyday use, that not so much as a tiered perspective, but, that people should be vetted on what type of firearms they are qualified to own as a civilian. Who would determine what level their skills appropriate, I guess would be the best way to put it.
Well, Will, I'm not saying let's go in and just hand the government a new card and say, oh, well, this person has to come and get this just so they can go and get a firearm. What I'm saying is, okay, well, there are firearms experts that aren't government officials.
That's fair.
And stuff like that. So, I mean, if they could go through a course and learn how to use that firearm correctly, because, I mean, there's a big difference in getting a .22 long rifle revolver and shooting it and going out and getting a semi-automatic weapon or an automatic weapon and using it. I mean, that's two different ball games.
I definitely can understand that. My problem is we live in a very imperfect world where there is no civilian entity that can definitely do that. Now, the NRA, granted, I don't personally agree with the NRA and their politics and everything like that, but a lot of the firearms instructors you have nowadays are certified by the NRA. So you could say that's a private entity, not a public entity, which government entities are public. So you could say that it's a civilian organization. It kind of isn't, because it is very politically intertwined. So my issue is at the point where you start over vetting individuals, you give government too much control. And the basis of the Second Amendment, from my perspective as a constitutionalist, is it's to be, at its basis, potentially anti-government if necessary. Only if necessary, but if necessary, it's to be anti-government. It's to go against them. So if they're vetting everybody who can have one, some people would say, okay, yeah, they're going to automatically deny those with the most potential to be a threat to their power structure. I know that seems a lot conspiratorial on my part, but that's the only way I know to explain it.
Well, I mean, at the same time, I mean, yes, the government could pick and choose who they wanted to do that through. I completely understand where you're coming from that. However, I mean, really, I mean, they're already doing that just about when you're going in and you're picking out on when you're applying for a gun. Because at the end of the day, they're asking you all those questions and they're asking, oh, have you had any mental disorders? Are you convicted felon? Everything else like that. So it's basically the same thing, but that's not what I'm proposing. What I'm proposing is you bring an outside source in that is a gun expert. You teach those people every part of that gun. You teach them how to operate that gun, how to safely store that gun, and how to get that gun out in the time of need. Anywhere from unholstering that weapon to how you need to fire that weapon when the need comes, along with when they're in their home. I mean, I'm not going to give my wife that has never shot a gun a day in her life a firearm and tell her, okay, well, this is what you do, and here's this firearm, so let's go ahead and have you do this. And if a robber comes in, no, I'm going to take her out and I'm going to show her and I'm going to teach her everything that I know about it. And yes, I've been around guns since I was 2 years old. I've been in the security field and law enforcement and corrections. But however, I think that everybody should have the training before they're just handed a firearm.
I believe that's fair.
I agree. Education, I think, is what's lacking most when it comes to a lot of gun owners these days. It's one of these things of just because I can doesn't mean am I prepared to own this weapon. I think that's what Nick's getting at the heart of his argument.
Here's an idea for someone to ignore. I'm not sure who. We were talking a little bit off mic, and we all kind of agreed on this. And correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but our school system is all federally regulated. Why not expand our education on our constitutional rights and our Constitution up to and including educating children on, well, not children. When I say children, I'm talking like, on into high school or things like that when it gets to this point. But going ahead and having a class, having a course on the Second Amendment, a well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. In that respect, well-regulated usually means well-trained, well-armed. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Why not teach young Americans, i.e. high school children, how to effectively keep and bear arms, how to appropriately and safely use a firearm? Take them to ranges, teach them the parts of the weapon, teach them how to clean a weapon appropriately, teach them to respect the power of a weapon. I think that would alleviate a lot of our issues that we're having today. But doing it in a very controlled and safe environment. Have whatever teacher that is teaching this be a certified instructor, the whole 9 yards. I think that would alleviate a lot of the problems that we have today. And as the constitutionalist here, I feel like our rights are being chipped away. Not necessarily because it's intentional, but because a lot of people don't quite understand what they are exactly.
I mean, and that's what I'm getting at, Will, is not the fact that, I think that the government should control everything that comes with gun laws and things like that. What I'm saying is that essentially what we're doing is, you remember when we were kids, we'd go out and get a new toy. Well, what's the first thing you do when you get that new toy? You're coming home to show your friends, look at this new toy I got. Everything else like that. Well, when you're 18 and 21 years old and you're going out and you're buying a new firearm,
you go show your buddies.
Exactly,
Yeah.
you're going to show your buddies. But if you haven't willingly...
I mean, let's be fair. We're grown men. As soon as we go buy a new firearm, we're coming to show our buddies, right?
Exactly. But we know how to operate those firearms in a correct and safe way. We know that we're clearing
But
those
why?
chambers.
Because we were shown. We both have parents with... I've got parents with military background. Your dad is military and has been law enforcement. And Kevin... you've got family members that have been hunters and things of that nature.
And military also.
Oh, military as well. My fault. And we've all been told and taught how to appropriately handle a weapon. You don't point it at anything that you are not okay with destroying. Treat every weapon as it's loaded. Things of that nature. But not everybody has that. And of course, in 2019 America, there's not only a lot of kids that are being raised by single parents who don't necessarily have the time. There's urban areas where they don't necessarily have the rights that we enjoy here in Mississippi. But there's also people who just don't have any interaction with firearms at all. And quite frankly, they're demonized in a decent, I won't say majority, but a decent portion of our country and the world at large, depending on what you're talking about, like New Zealand. I don't like y'all's gun laws, or I don't like your Prime Minister's opinion. I know we've got a few listeners in New Zealand, and let me offer the Backwards History Podcast's most sincerest condolences to your situation right now. As far as anybody who is a firearms enthusiast, I'm sorry, guys. Feel free to immigrate to the United States.
But on that same note, I do like your official religion in New Zealand. Any guesses?
No.
It's Jedi.
Shut up, Kevin.
I kid you not. It's Jedi.
I'm gonna have to research this.
But
Please,
that's the verify.
please bash him on our Facebook group if he's being an idiot.
But back to what I was saying.
Yeah.
Basically, what I was saying is that basically, when you were a kid, you went out and you got a new toy, you wanted to show it off to your friends. Well, these 18 and 21-year-olds that are just going out and getting and haven't had any proper training, whether it be from parents that have had proper training and show their children, okay, well, this is proper training on how you handle a firearm and things to that nature. Or whether it being them going through a enhanced carry course or something to that nature. Those people haven't had that kind of thing to go through.
Right, but then all of a sudden they've hit 18, 21 years old and I can get this now whether I've had any conversation with anybody about it, but I'm going to go show my buddies and I end up screwing up and I shoot myself in the foot. I shoot a buddy.
Yeah.
I destroy something, whatever. Yeah, I get that. I definitely get that. And I'm all for everyone being trained on how to effectively use a weapon. I would be perfectly okay with that. I think that the money that we're using or that we're proposing to use to enforce new gun laws go into educating people on firearms in general. The best way to respect something and the power that it holds is to understand it, not be afraid of it. Because these laws that are proposing now aren't going to do anything to anything except for after something bad happens.
I completely agree. And I can't tell you how many times in the security field that I've walked in with an employee after owners that had my guys come in armed, or I'm coming in just to check on my guys. And there'll be an employee that comes up to me and go, "Oh, sir, I'm really nervous with your guys having firearms or you having a firearm on." And I'll have to sit down and I'll talk with them and be like, "Listen, it's not the firearm, it's the operator." Because at the end of the day, a pencil doesn't misspell words for you no more than a firearm kills. So
Shut up. My story is that my fork made me fat. I don't want to hear no argument.
So at the end of the day, it's not the firearm. It's people not being educated, or it's a bad incident with the firearm because somebody wasn't properly using that firearm in the right capacity that this stuff is going on. I mean, if you're told that the stove is hot and you go over there and touch it,
You're going to get burned.
you're going to get burned.
But you're going to know it's coming.
Exactly.
Right.
So, I mean, if these people are properly trained and know what the consequences are of their actions, I think there would be a lot less incidents that happen rather than what we're seeing now.
Well, I mean, it's no surprise to anybody that is dealing with the youth of 2019 that respect is an issue, not just with firearms, but respect in general. And we need to find a way to bring that back. Respect for each other, respect for weapons, respect for all kinds of things. And I think that would fix a lot. That would fix a whole lot. Let me tell y'all the quote that's the antithesis to the one that Kevin gave us at the beginning about subjugating by taking arms. This is by someone who is definitely on the opposite end of things with Adolf Hitler, but still not someone we want to idolize in the United States. But just because somebody's crazy doesn't mean they're wrong. Karl Marx said, "Under no pretext shall arms and ammunition be surrendered. Any attempt to disarm the workers must be frustrated by force if necessary." In this instance, we, the American people, would be the workers. We are the taxed. We are the ones that make this whole thing work. The politicians in Washington would be nothing without us. It's not that we would be nothing without them. They would be nothing without us. And the only thing that protects the other 9 amendments in the Bill of Rights is our ability to defend those 9 amendments in the Bill of Rights. You can argue all you want to. You can holler and scream all you want to, exercising your First Amendment right. Anyone can shut you up unless you can stop them.
Oh, no, don't get me wrong. By no means will anybody ever pry my guns out of my hands. I'd have to be cold and dead. There's no doubt about that.
Charleston Heston from my cold, dead hands. Yeah, I'm with it, man. I'm with it. Just like I said on the 4th of July episode, the United States is my country. Just because I don't agree with the government doesn't mean that I don't love the United States. I love the United States. It's almost like a church. You know, the church is not the pastor or the building or whatever. The church is its people. Doesn't matter if they meet in the building or they meet out in the parking lot, they meet in the middle of a field. That's the church. The United States isn't its government. It's not Washington, D.C. It's the people of the United States. And before I let anyone's rights fall to any kind of tyranny, I would pick up a rifle and defend it. I would defend it with or without a rifle, but I have a lot better chance of doing so with one. Don't advocate for your own rights to be taken away from you because you're afraid because some lunatic did something else.
Exactly. And I will never advocate for guns to be taken. Like I said, I mean, you'd have to pry them out of my hands, dead and cold. However, people are worried about the shootings that have been going on lately and how they've grown. But at the end of the day, somebody that is trained with a knife could do more damage than what some of these guys have done.
It was either today or yesterday. Granted, this is being recorded on Saturday the 10th. This will be posted on Monday. There was a stabbing of 4 people. They were killed by stabbing, and the measure of a mass shooting is 3 people plus the assailant being killed. So by that definition, this would be a mass stabbing. So someone can be just as effective with a knife as a gun. If that's the standard for a mass shooting, that's a mass stabbing. Exactly. I mean, blunt objects have killed more people than firearms ever have. The only problem is the mass shootings are more publicized than anything else.
I mean, essentially what they're trying to do is them telling sober drivers not to drive because drunk drivers are driving. I mean,
it's like taking my car away because a drunk driver killed a car full of a family. That doesn't make any sense. Removing the rights of the law-abiding because of the law-breaking is one of the dumbest things you could ever do.
Essentially, if you take the guns away from the good guys, you're leaving the bad guys with guns because bad guys don't follow rules.
Notice this kind of stuff never happens in Mississippi. Now, we did have a shooting in a Walmart just 2 days prior to the shooting in El Paso. It was a lot shorter lived than in El Paso because we have constitutional carry. You do not have to have a concealed carry permit to conceal carry a pistol in Mississippi. Anybody knows if they act up in this state, they're going to end up with a lot more holes than they started with. We don't play those games here. And I feel like that makes criminals respect the civilian population a little bit more. Now, Mississippi may be last in a lot of other things, but we are one of the first in gun rights. And we have a lot less problems here from what I can understand.
I definitely agree. I mean, you're going to end up with Swiss cheese if you come around to one of our Walmarts and anything else like that. My company stands for God, family, and safety. I mean, those are all 3 important things to me. However, I constitutionally carry. I carry when I'm at work. I carry when I'm not at work. I mean, I carry a gun at least 40 hours a week while I'm at work. I'm going to carry it when I'm not at work also. And I'm going to make sure that my family and anybody that I care about is protected. So that's something that I don't want taken away from me. But
as an enhanced carry holder myself, it doesn't even matter if it's my family or not. If you are in the vicinity of me, I'm always carrying my firearm as well. You have nothing to fear from me. Period. I may not know you from Adam's house cat, but if I see something wrong happening to you, I am 100% ready to do everything I can to defend you just like you were one of my family members. And that's why I carry. And I think I speak for most people that do carry. We don't carry just for ourselves. We don't just carry for our family. We carry to defend anyone and everyone in need that we can help. We will.
Now, this is going back to what we were talking about earlier on people being trained. But it still has to do with the Second Amendment also. So when it comes down to it, those people that haven't been trained, but they go out and they get a firearm and they're constitutionally carrying. Let's say a bad guy walks in a restaurant and his only intent is to just rob the place. But you have somebody that is constitutionally carrying, but they haven't trained. They haven't had any type of preparation to stop a bad guy if he walks in.
An untrained person with a gun can be just as dangerous as a crazy person with a gun.
Well, yes, because he pulls his gun out with no intent to use it, but tries to scare the guy. Well, then that guy starts to shoot. What happens after that? I mean, he pulled his gun and no intent to use it, so more than likely he's going to get shot first.
Or even if he had intent to use it, if he ends up shooting the wrong person
Yes.
because of his unskilled behavior, that's a fair point.
One side note I like to add is every time we have one of these mass shootings, there's always finger pointing, blaming, things like that. And the fact that they're trying to go back to that old argument of violent video games being the root cause of mass shootings, besides the fact that it's stupid, it's just lazy.
If Call of Duty was going to make me shoot somebody, then Mario Kart was going to make me throw a turtle at your head, Kevin.
I saw a meme. It said, we had 2 whole world wars before video games.
Exactly.
And it's a lazy argument. And these statistics have been studied, and they've been conclusively proved that violent video games do not produce violent people.
Like you said in a previous episode, our history is cyclical. We've had this argument. We had this argument in the early 90s. We had this argument in the early 2000s. Now we're almost to 2020, and here we are again with the exact same argument. So basically, what we're all trying to tell you here tonight is educate yourself on your rights, how to properly exercise your rights, and in this instance, your Second Amendment rights. Don't just go out and buy a firearm. Do what you need to do to use it appropriately, to maintain your skills appropriately, and be as effective as possible. And just like always, we don't want you to take our words for anything we say here tonight. Look it up, do your own research, and as always, trust, but verify.